You can't force people or force feed them the understanding that this is our reality. Like, children are influenced by these things. Racism is real, pressure is real. You can only present them with opportunities to purchase products that might counteract that without them knowing.
So one of the things we talk about often in technology, in the tech industry, is like, the need for representation, especially like when I'm talking to students, and they don't see themselves represented. Increasingly they are, but not so much representation with people who are building super duper big companies, although it is happening now. Healthy Roots dolls came about because you felt we needed better representation with regards to the toys our kids play with. Can you talk about why representation is such an important thing in toys, with something that seems so simple?
Yeah, when I was studying illustration at the Rhode Island School of Design, I didn't really have an interest in toys. Haven't really had an interest in toys since I was like 4. But I did have an interest in social impact and the work that artists do and the way it can influence culture and conversation. And so for me, that meant researching and learning that toys actually have a huge influence on how kids think, act, and see themselves. And so when children can't find products that look like them, it can have a negative impact on their self-esteem. I also learned a little bit about the Brown versus Board of Education trial and the Mamie Clark doll test and what role that played in children's self-perception and asking children, how do you feel about this white doll versus this black doll, and having white children overwhelmingly ascribe negative attributes to the black doll, but also having black children do the same thing. And so we see how at a young age, children can be socialized to have these biases, and then thinking about, well, what can we do and what can we create to counteract that?
Far too often, because I have daughters, far too often, parents will say, well, they'll feel, well, it's just a doll, because we don't really see the impacts like present day. It may play out over a lifetime. When you were doing that research, like, how did you recognize that, creating the change for young girls and boys today, actually, in your marketing strategy, how do you communicate that this actually has an impact and it's important to be resolved today versus waiting till they're older, to try to fix, the perceptions that they have about communities that they're a part of?
Actually, I don't think we really include that in our marketing because our goal is never to convince people that this product is important. It's to present it to people that understand or that are looking for it. You can't force people or force feed them the understanding that this is our reality. Like, children are influenced by these things. Racism is real, pressure is real. You can only present them with opportunities to purchase products that might counteract that without them knowing. So we don't really put that in our marketing. Our marketing is mainly just, look at this really great toy, kids love her, here's what she teaches them to do, and then you know what, under the surface of that, this is the potential long-term impact that you might see.
I love that response because it plays into so many different verticals. I was having a conversation, and I didn't prepare this, but you made me think about a conversation I had with Dr. Keith Hallman, who runs the market in Atlanta. And I was talking to her about how I don't particularly subscribe to, support our businesses. I feel like I want to create value. And if you see value, then like we don't support Walmart. We don't support Target. Like, we go shop there because they have the things that we need. And so I wonder what your perspective is on, because you just talked about, you don't try to sell a narrative. You're trying to create something. Hopefully people see value. What do you say to that perspective? Because I'm very interested in this. I never want to just go around and say, hey, come buy my thing because I need your support. Does that make sense?
No, I think it makes 100% sense. I always believe that you have a company if people are buying your product. And if people are not buying your product, you don't have a company. And there's nothing you can say or do to make people buy something if they don't want to buy it. They're not going to, people aren't going to buy something just because you're black, just because you're a woman. They're going to buy it because you are those things and they value that, and they also love your product. And so I believe in letting the product speak for itself. And if you also think that the story behind the person who built it is great, awesome, but that's not what's going to make you, that's not what my goal is, to make you buy this product. My goal is for people who identify with the value to purchase it.
So let's go a step further there, because you're not trying to sell people who, may not, prescribe to that idea, but there's also hundreds of other dolls, that may be of color. What separates Healthy Roots dolls apart from the pack when you're not trying to necessarily sell a narrative?
It's a Healthy Roots doll. The other dolls aren't Healthy Roots dolls.
Dig that.
I think it's interesting because people are like, "Oh, well, how are you different?" Or so and so could do this. I was like, they could, but they're not, and they can't. That's our product. But the other thing is, I don't necessarily see it as competition because there's no child that only has one doll. We just created another option for you, and if you add Zoe to that club of toys, awesome.
I love that. Going further on the point of particularly dolls of color, we often see products that target, black consumers, whether it be black children, black adults, or whatever. And they too often, I think they are lame attempts, likely designed with the idea that we're monolithic, sometimes designed with stereotypes. So thinking about toys, we don't, or before Healthy Roots, we haven't had many that reflected shade well. Dolls that were very dark, dolls that were very light. How do you find, dolls that represent the spectrum, of black people? Why do companies still to this day have such a hard time with this?
I don't know if that's true because I see so many different toys that I even now am collecting. If I see something on the shelf, I'm grabbing it. I just saw Encantos from Disney. They released those dolls. Raya, the Last Dragon, they released dolls for those characters. So I think it's more so, it's not that they don't exist, it's that people can't find them. The distribution of
that may be true for me.
products.
Okay, then that's probably my case.
But no, that's another thing. Why are these products not widely distributed? Why are people not aware of the products that exist out there? Why do they have to have an ad be shown to them first before they know it exists? Why is it not on every Walmart shelf? Why is it not in every store? Why is it not equally as distributed as the non-characters of color?
Yeah. So let's talk about distribution, because we're moving into a world, because I wanted to talk to you about how about getting on a store shelf. And I wonder if you think, do we still need to be on store shelves, or is direct to consumer, a valid distribution channel for startup toy makers?
I think D2C is a great channel, but it's also marketing. So if you're not able to market a product and build an audience and know how to speak to that audience and utilize all the tools in order to get your ads in front of the right people, build your email marketing funnel, build the right website, you're not going to succeed in that space. It's very challenging. You have to have all the right tools, all the right approaches. But it's great when you get it right. It's the way so many brands have been able to launch themselves and then establish with retailers. It's how a lot of, underestimated founders get their products into the market in the first place. But they also have the tools and resources to do so, or they had to figure it out. So I totally believe in direct-to-consumer channel. I love it. It's great. It's a marketing effort for sure, but it's not the only way. It's a great way to start.
Yeah, I was just took my kids to watch Encanto, and I get why they want those toys, because they were just on the big screen, these sorts of things. How do you, if you were building Healthy Roots over today in the world of Snapchat, in the world of TikTok, in the world of Roblox, I tweeted this out a couple of weeks ago that I believe Roblox is like the LinkedIn for kids. That's how they go and they meet people and they see what they did because they got this backpack full of these virtual toys in their metaverse. So how do you build demand for toys when we are so used to, at least in the day I grew up, if it was on TV, that's what I wanted. And it's not maybe so much the case of that anymore. Is that correct?
I think from I know from my experience that it's grown organically. So it's a lot of storytelling. It's a lot of organic marketing, sharing your story, doing the podcast, going to the events, creating your content and sharing it online with an audience. And then people organically just deciding to say, hey, I found this thing. You should totally check this out for your kid. And then, earned media. But that's a slow build. And I think that's something that people forget when they can look at a company like Healthy Root Styles and be like, oh, wow, this happened so quickly. It's like, no. I started in class in 2014, and that was like 5 years of developing the first product, building a lot of organic relationships that have helped to make it a bit easier to get those big published gigs, getting into, being nominated for Toy of the Year last year and things like that. And so I say that I think it's really valuable to focus on organic. So organically having kids find your product and clicking with it because you sent it out to a bunch of influencers and they all did YouTube reviews and now all the kids know about it and things like that. They're telling their friends. It's incredibly valuable.
Do you think there's a day where you might, have the dolls as characters on TikTok?
I think that's such a cool concept. I think that also costs a lot of money.
Yeah, there you go. I love it. Hey, that's
if I could do everything, I would do everything.
No,
but everything costs money.
No, for sure. Like because so many of our people, and I want to talk about how you funded this in a little bit, but so many of our people have these remarkable things, but having the fuel in the tank can be an issue. And so you just talked about the idea that this was not fast for you, but how do you know? Let's say you're the toy maker, you're a kid's book publisher, and you're doing this out of your kitchen or your garage, and it's year 3, and you went from selling 20 to 200. Like, that's not like a huge amount of growth over a period of time. Not at least not in the world that we talk about of scale. But how do you know that it's worth it to keep going? What are the indicators you're looking for?
I mean, those indicators are metrics that you define for yourself. So if you told yourself in a year that you're going to hit these sales goals and these are the strategies you're going to implement to hit those goals, and then you don't, you got to decide, do I keep going or do I try something else and see how that impacts my goals for the next year? So you set your own pace, you set your own factors that determine success. And if you don't hit those factors, then I guess that's how you make your decisions whether or not to keep going.
Yeah. I was talking to a fashion designer a few episodes ago about getting celebrity backing, like an influencer to wear your stuff, and how much of an impact that is required in order to build a label that people want and desire. And I wonder, because you mentioned this, getting influencers, getting it in their hands and getting them to talk about it could be an important, road, an avenue for, you to build demand for your thing. Can you talk about some strategies that may have worked for you or that you've seen work with regard to toys and dolls and novelties to being able to get people to pay attention to talk about your thing on their channels?
Yeah, I think one of the brands that has the money to do this, LOL Surprise, is this major. I mean, you already know your kids already have them, don't they?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they already do.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. But LOL Surprise has taken how our attention has changed and also recognizing how short children's attention is on products by creating these little just scarcity moments with these different little products. And it literally is the way that kids' brains work. It's that hit of opening something, getting all these little different things, and then being able to go buy another one. And they're not expensive. They're fairly priced for all these little pieces. And it's wow, and it creates collectibles for the older demographic of people who participate in doll collection and things like that, and they trade these things. And they also use celebrities like Cardi B who have kids. They might not be always family friendly characters, but they have children who love these things and throw birthday parties for them. So it's the scarcity combined with the visibility combined with the fun play pattern. It's a hit.
Do you think my brain has not moved past where we talked about the animation and having the TikTok, virtual star of a Healthy Roots doll. Because I think about Barbie and all the verticals Barbie has moved into, whether it be, Barbie comic books, and there's Barbie posters, and there's Barbie stickers that you can, and all of these different things. what are low hanging fruit verticals that Healthy Roots could go into? Should just the right partner come along? Oh, I guess my question is probably more so like, what is, if you were to grow 1.5 times your growth today, what are the key things that would need to happen for your target audience? What I would imagine, and you can correct me, is like an 8 to 15-year-old.
8 to 15-year-olds is my target audience?
I'm asking.
Right now? No.
I'm asking. What's your target?
No, it's like 6 to 11.
6 to 11? Oh, it's too far
babies.
off. That wasn't too far off.
I don't see no 15-year-olds walking around. If you see a 15-year-old with one of my dolls with a matching outfit, please take a picture for me. That is adorable.
No, because I see healthy, because representation has not been there. I think there's an opportunity here. Now we off on a whole different thing. Like I feel like there's a bigger market play for you versus like other dolls, because we haven't had that representation with young girls who see themselves physically animated, and
No,
that
totally
girl,
real.
that girl probably missed seeing, because we talked about distribution. I go down the aisles of Target. Again, I talked about, I don't see a bunch of shades. And so maybe I'm in the wrong Target, and that's probably valid. But I see potentially, and my oldest is 11, so we'll figure this out in 4 years if she still wants, representation. But I do see, like, for girls who did grow up at, 5, 6, 7, didn't see themselves in those dolls, perhaps maybe they're not playing with them, but perhaps they are the collectors of these things. Perhaps, because that's what
we totally have collectors.
Yeah.
It's a thing. Lots of people are like, I didn't have this. I bought one for my grandbaby, but then I also bought one for me.
Yeah. But you don't. So you don't see like there's any 15-year-olds who are like an avenue into that demographic. I think there could.
Maybe if we got Zoe some like lashes and like.
There we go.
brows,
we just started. Let's go. We could die. We just made this
get
happen.
the acrylics.
It all happened on Black Tech Money. Come on, see, we about to get some lashes for these dolls, because it's happening, because they represent what's like. You get some of them furry slippers, put it on that
Yes.
Let's go.
Get her a little Telfar.
Let's go.
Yeah.
I'm talking about it.
Glam.
Many of the places where you've raised money, like they don't like fund like CPG. I don't know if this is CPG or not, like, or toys. Like they're tech investors. Many of the places where you've gotten money. What, from your seat, being the person who pitched and won these competitions, won these investments, what was it that got them to buy in and say, "Yo, Yelitsa's got something"? I know we are doing tech over here and coders and engineers, but this, because I've heard so many people who do packaged goods. And I'm not sure if this falls in that category. I don't know if this is a CPG. Like, you can correct me. But I talked to people like Tristan Walker, who actually does CPG. And he's like, those investors who he was friends with were like, is the market that big? When you talk about the Black consumer, how do you get those investors to buy into this?
It's me and my pink sweaters.
Hey.
No. So I am always very strategic in terms of the spaces I go into and the conversations I have with people, because in 2016, 2017, it was very hard for me when I was, college student, freshly graduated, didn't come from an entrepreneur background. I was an art student. I studied illustration, even though I had done an accelerator program, but people didn't see the necessary requirements in order to believe in me as a founder just yet. And so I learned that the most valuable thing that I have is my time. And so I would always tell founders, stop chasing money and go find people that actually want to fund you. And so you can't go to the competitions where they're focused on tech and SaaS and fintech, because, if you're competing with a person that's trying to cure cancer and you're making dolls, they're not particularly interested in that. So I actually only participated in programs and pitch competitions where they were either trying to support female founders, founders of color, or invest in physical product companies. So one of the first competitions I did was the Startup Stampede in Durham, North Carolina, which is actually specifically for e-commerce companies, which is where I learned how to make Facebook ads. And that's how I successfully had really strong sales seasons in 2019 and 2020. That's how I learned how to build dynamic audiences online. I then went on to win the first New Voices pitch competition at Essence Fest, which is where a lot of Black women are, and that fund is specifically for Black women. I then did another accelerator program. Then I won the Wendy Lee Main Street Venture Grant, which is from Cincinnati, which is in the city that I lived in, and they were supporting female founders. So all my money technically came from these places. Like even the Quicken Loans Detroit demo day where we took home $125,000, that was for companies that were in the city of Detroit, that were starting. Like my phase was start. Like I was a new company. I told a compelling story, and I also had the support of the community after being there for some time, and the people voted for me. So the short answer is that I tell a compelling story, I have a great product, and people believe in the work that I'm doing. I also curate the things that I compete in. But that took a lot of time.
Yeah. A lot of Black founders find, or I guess a lot of founders in general find that they need to be part of that story, part of the story. How do you have to, as an entrepreneur, be the thing to the consumer that sells it, or can you lead with the product?
I think when you say that, all I can think about is authenticity, which oftentimes means that you have to be a part of the story. So I started this company. It's relatively young. I'm young. I created this because of a compelling reason. I am the company. I'm part of the company's story. And that's for people being able to see the person who started it, who's constantly working on it, and seeing where we started versus where we are now. That matters because it's it's relatable. And it may not be relatable in the sense that everybody's starting a company, but it's like, wow, I've always wanted to achieve great things. And I'm seeing this person who actually did all this work to do it. That's really inspiring. I applaud that.
Yeah, I'm glad you answered that way, because it leads me into what I thought you were going to go in the direction of. And is it then a marketable asset then if the company, if Yelitsa is tied to it? Like I'm making this up, like could a Hasbro say, yo, we want Healthy Roots dolls, but without Yelitsa, there is no Healthy Roots dolls. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. I hear what you're saying. There are definitely identities that are tied to brands, like Oprah is the Oprah brand. But I don't know. Maybe one day Zoe can be the face of Healthy Roots dolls.
Yeah, I just wondered if you think about that, because I wonder. I get the question about how integrated should the individual story be with the brand, and I hear a wide variety of responses to that. Some people don't want to be the face at all; they want to lead with the thing, and I was just curious on your take on that. So I appreciate that.
I don't consider myself the face of my company. I consider myself the face of my own experience and story building the company. And sometimes we share that through the company as well. And I get to talk about the product.
When you think ultimately about exiting, if you ever think about exiting this company, and I'll let you speak on that if you do, do you encourage people to think about exiting at all? And do you believe that or do you believe that there will one day be a new Hasbro, like Healthy Roots dolls could be the one, sucking up other opportunities instead of being the one that is acquired?
I always encourage people to think about their long-term plans. That's what I'm always telling people when it comes to, even early on in this conversation where you mentioned, how do you know when to quit, or how do you know when to keep going? Like, you have to create long-term plans with milestones and then check in with yourself on those milestones to determine, is this progressing? Is this not progressing? Do I need to pivot? So if you're starting a company, you need to think about down the road what you ultimately want to happen, whether that's I want to sell this company for this much money, or I want to partner, like merge, whatever that might be, and that'll help drive the rest of the decisions you make along the way. I think it's incredibly important to keep that as a part of your story if that's the journey you want to take.
Pre-COVID, we had a lot of conversations, particularly in tech, about where you're located geographically, depending on what you're building. So if you were building fintech, you needed to be in New York. If you were building, a consumer thing, a social network, you needed to be in the Valley. Or media, you needed to be in LA. A lot of that's changed with COVID. And you're Detroit, Midwest, like I am, Toledo. I wonder, what are, from your perspective, what are the advantages of being where you are? And do you see, could your success have grown better or faster or worse had you not been in Detroit building?
I definitely think that some of my advantages are the cheap flights to everywhere else. And I think I've always just been a big fish in a little pond from where I went from elementary school to middle school to high school, from the college that I went to, from the cities that I've lived in. I've always had I've always been one of the few people who has like big goals, big visions, and is untethered. So I don't think where I'm based can stop me from doing anything because I'm going to go where I need to go to do what I need to do.
So you don't think being presently there matters? And I ask this because go ahead.
I think it can it depends on who you are. Like if you don't have the access to the capital you need to go from place to place to place and spend a month here, spend 2 weeks here, it's going to be way harder. But if you can do that, do it. I would travel I spent 4 months in Durham, North Carolina. I literally just packed up my stuff, went down there, stayed there for 4 months. I've done that for Detroit, where I went from Ohio to Michigan for 4 months and then ultimately decided to relocate here. But I spent a whole year basically on planes, just going places. But I think it's nice to have a home base where you have a core network where there's a growing ecosystem of people doing similar work, in startup and direct to consumer marketers, so that you can like mesh with them. I think that's something I definitely gained from my art school experience, which is like being in the critique world of like putting your artwork on the wall, getting feedback from people. Yeah. So making sure you have a circle so you can do that. But I don't feel limited. I personally, in my experience, have never felt limited based on where I live because I'm going to go where I need to be. Although I do understand how where you live can impact that. You just have to find your workarounds. And so for me, my workarounds were just packing it up and going and asking for introductions.
Take it. In the few minutes I have left with you, I do want to talk about getting on a store shelf. And can you talk about like what retailers want to see? Like how do you even get on their radar to where they're having a real conversation with you?
Well, I think my particular strategy is name dropping. So I will name drop retailers in articles. I had a Forbes interview where I was like, it'd be great to be in Target one day. And then a buyer reached out and we were able to have a conversation about that. But I think the best way to get on retail shelves is to do 5 years worth of work, build strong sales through your online store, and build a bunch of relationships along the way where that's not your first touch point with that retailer.
So when you go, they have records they can look at, or what are they looking for?
I can't even say that I can't even tell someone how you would go about getting into retail because my journey is so unique in itself. And it's like, oh yeah, just do what I did. It's like, I can't really tell you to do what I did because I don't really know what I did. I just did this work and I purposefully went about like, oh yeah, I know I want to be in Target. Let me work on building this channel. So there are definitely lots of opportunities to meet buyers and get your products in front of people. You can look up those opportunities. I know I am in a bunch of different toy groups and organizations like Women in Toys and the Toy Association that specifically creates opportunities for members to pitch their products. Even the New Voices Fund, which is a way that people can pitch for in competitions for capital, they have a segment of that organization that helps introduce people to Target for potential retail opportunities. So, but none of that matters if you don't have a compelling product and an already established brand because you have to be able to market it.
I'm sure because it has to happen when you're out. Let's say you go to a show and you're walking down the aisle because you just left your booth for 15 minutes or whatever. You're just out looking at other people, talking to other founders who have products. And you see indicators that make you interested on if this person is ever going to get on the shelf because of something. What is typically a reason why somebody who might have a decent product, what is a flag that says, you know what, this person's probably not going to make it to a shelf? I can tell.
That's more of a question for a buyer, but what I can say are some of the things that a buyer is going to need. And so you need to be able to scale. So if
What
a buyer
define that?
says they want so if a buyer says they need 10,000 units in 6 months, you need to be able to produce 10,000 units in 6 months. And sometimes that means you need to finance that inventory. And if you don't have financing options, you're not going to be able to get that inventory to them, so you're not going to get put on the shelf. You also have to have the right margins. So retailers expect specific margins on products. And if you haven't priced your product correctly or your cost of production is too high, you're not going to be able to give them those margins in order to make it worth the opportunity. And then sometimes you will have to purchase marketing assets. So those ads that you see, those inserts in, print materials for the store where brands are featured, sometimes brands have to pay for that in order to market and sell the product. So the marketing doesn't just stop on your own social, you also have to market your retailers. So it's going to be about financing, bandwidth, and can you keep up?